Welcome to Transparency with Diana B., a podcast from wealthmanagement.com focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. In this podcast, we explore some of the deepest struggles and hardships that many advisors face and bring these issues out into the open so that others may find healing. Join us for this journey where we explore ways to overcome the stresses and anxieties as Diana draws from years of expertise and guest experts to manage the personal challenges of advisors.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Transparency with Diana B., a podcast by wealthmanagement.com. My name is Diana Britton, and I'm the managing editor of wealthmanagement.com. For those of you who are new to the podcast, each episode focuses on a personal development issue facing financial advisors and financial services professionals. Guests join me to talk about their journey dealing with the struggle and how they found healing. My guest today is Robert Schein. He's the managing director and partner at Blanke Schein Wealth Management, a Hightower firm. He's based in beautiful Palm Desert, California. Frank Sinatra used to have a home there, right?
A lot of celebrities out here.
Yeah. And of course, Coachella Valley, where the music festival is. And in addition to being a financial advisor, in 2011, Robert founded the Society of Financially Empowered Women, a nonprofit organization dedicated to facilitating a community and forum where independent women can acquire the confidence to take control of their financial lives. But Robert, thank you so much, first of all, for being here, for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Diana. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about the Society of the Few in a little bit. But Robert sort of got the inspiration for that organization and some of the work he's doing now with women from his own life experiences, specifically as he helped his mother navigate the finances in the aftermath of his father's death. He also has three high school daughters. Is that right? They're all in high school now?
4 children, 3 high school daughters, so 3 girls and a boy.
Very nice. And 7 nieces, you said?
Correct.
Very nice. And I have 1 niece. And so he has a passion for women, for helping women navigate financial challenges. But Rob, before we sort of jump to all that, let's go back to your roots a little bit and specifically talk about your father, because I know that a lot of things that happened have influenced and shaped who you are from a young age. And so your father, he immigrated to the U.S. from what was then Yugoslavia. And I know a lot of people come to the U.S. in pursuit of the American dream, what people think of as the American dream anyways. So what did that look like for your father when he came to America?
Yeah, the story specifically for my father, began back when his family immigrated from Yugoslavia back then. It's Croatia today. But back in 1953, they came through Ellis Island, 3 weeks on a boat, and saw Lady Liberty, and as a family landed here in New York and worked really hard. He had to do English in 5th grade 3 times. Traditionally, when you don't know the language and you start basically afresh, as the family did way back when. They worked hard. He met my mom back in New York, and then they started having 2 boys later on in life in the 70s. That's when my brother was born, and that's when I was born a few years later. And sort of the traditional American dream. And as I grew up later on, my father basically said, there's 2 reasons why we sacrificed, grandma, grandpa sacrificed, and we all came to America. And those 2 reasons very specifically were for education and opportunity. And when he told me that, it was a huge impact because I never forgot that. I mean, it was really, if you think back then, that's why everyone was coming here, even still to this day. It's the education and opportunity. And so I sort of, that stayed with me, and that's always stayed with me ever since.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of know what you mean. My husband's family came over from Russia, I think in the 80s, and just really worked hard, didn't have much money, but just his mother just really worked hard and tried to create opportunities for my husband here. So how did you, I know you and your brother ended up in finance, both of you. How did you guys end up in the field?
Yeah, great question. It really is just that focus on always trying to improve yourself from, our kitchen table, if you will. So I always call it kitchen table conversations. So my mom and dad both worked hard. And my mom also worked as well to sacrifice to put both my brother and I through a Jesuit high school. It cost more than our college did. So I firsthand got to see that sacrifice, both what dad and mom have done for both my brother and I, and eventually would go down to University of Arizona. I both studied finance and marketing. My brother's 6 years older than I am, and was very successful in his path. And I loved the wealth management industry. He got into the industry right out of college, and I would tag along as a teenager, even through his college internships, and actually help him in summers when he worked for all the firms. And he would cold call, I would cold call. This is the mid 90s, early 90s. And I just found a passion for it. I love helping people. I love connecting. And I also love finance. And so that was sort of my launch obviously in college, graduated finance marketing. Then early on started out with a wealth management firm and the training program, and go to New York for 3 weeks, and off you go. And ever since, I just love the industry.
Yeah, and now folks are talking about cold calling being dead, right?
Yeah, we would do 100 a day, and that would be, those were the days, and I don't think you could even do that again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm trying to think it's either Morgan Stanley or Merrill, who I think banned cold calling in their training programs now. But anyways, and what did your father and mother do when you were young?
So yeah, my father was an engineer, and he worked for Honeywell. He used to be, various companies back in the 80s and 90s, but ultimately an engineer. And he worked all the way through 70 years old, sort of the American dream, work hard. And my mom was sort of worked from time to time to help put us through, like I said, high school and college, but she was primarily stay at home. And we grew up in a very traditional family. By that, I mean, my dad took care of the finances. And so every step of the way, my dad was the head of the household. Again, that's where it came from, just how society was back then, especially when you come over from another country. And traditionally back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it just evolved. And so my dad worked all the way through ripe old age of 80. And by that, my brother and I had some kids. And so there'd be grandkids. And he's like, you know what? 70 years old is a great time to retire. He did. And he wanted to spend time with the grandkids and both my brother and I and our families. And life happens. You can never plan it. But, we had a turn for the worse, if you will, with my dad's health, because 4 months into his retirement, he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so that's when our whole world changed, Diana. It was, life can change on a dime, as you know, and everyone is going through something within their own family. You just don't know what it is. And for us, I remember the phone call when my mom called me and said, come home, your father is sick. And both my brother and I were there for my family, but it was a real situation. My mom was now in a world of having to learn 2 languages. In Scottsdale, Arizona, we were blessed to have the medical relationship and hospital of the Mayo Clinic. So it's like a team approach to help every step of the way, all the stuff that my dad needed through his four years of battling cancer. But my mom was now having to learn 2 languages, both the medical world as well as the financial world, because my dad was financially just in charge. And my mom's blessed to have both my brother and I in the financial services industry, but not everyone is. And through that experience personally of helping my mom, partnering with her, connecting where she is and creating a baseline and organizing her life and simplifying it. And that was a journey. It was every step of the way. But that was really the launching pad for sort of my life mission, as both my brother and I help my mom through that, navigating that just horrible turn of circumstances and change of life.
Yeah. And so I guess tell us about those years when he was battling cancer. I mean, did they have hope that the treatments would work, or, I think it was, you said stage 4 stomach cancer.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So they had to remove his entire stomach. And it was one of those things where everyone's related or impacted by, they know somebody or a family member, unfortunately, that has had cancer. Right. Mm-hmm. And when you get to that world, there are now, medically speaking, there are a lot more success stories, and thank God for science in that respect. But as a family, I and my brother and I, because we're in the financial services industry, we know, we've seen this, and we've walked our clients through every life stage almost daily as we come into our office. So we kind of knew while Dad was suffering and we wanted the medical team to help him prolong his life, we knew without a shadow of a doubt that there's going to be life without Dad. And that process, then you have to drive and turn your attention to your mom, right? And say, okay, does she have what she needs? Well, she has a support system. She has a network of support, and both, my brother and I, and obviously our wives respectively, and just family around to help my mom. But now, is she equipped right? Where is she in her stage of life? Because 90% of her energy, emotional energy at the time, was being a primary caretaker for my father, right? So the financial side had to take a back seat. And so she was every day with a doctor's appointment and learning something new and understanding what that is. And it's not even like, this is like maybe not as prevalent as Google is today, where you could Google stuff and sort of figure it out. You're going by doctor's appointment to doctor's appointment and leading you down a path. So it was basically a four-year journey from start to finish, being there for my mom, who was there for my dad every single day.
Yeah, I think I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but my father died of pancreatic cancer, which is the most aggressive cancer in the world. I think he died within 6 months of being diagnosed, but so much shorter time frame. But yeah, and there wasn't any treatment to be had. But I mean, I think my family, me and my brothers, kind of went through the same thing we need to take care of my mom. What's going to happen after he passes away? And she had a pretty good handle on the finances, so that wasn't really an issue, but it was more emotionally she needed support. And I've just seen what cancer can do to a family, and the whole hospice circumstances. It's awful. But how did you sort of support your mother and help her through that time? I mean, and specifically with relation to the finances, what kind of did she need after your father passed away in terms of on the financial side?
Yeah, even before he passed, right? So it's basically putting her in the driver's seat and connecting with her at a level to number one is to get to baseline understanding, what she knows, what she's comfortable with, what she needs a little bit more, education and support on. And both my brother and I were there for her every step of the way as it relates to that. Now, keep in mind her investment and all of that stuff was well looked after. But what wasn't looked after, and this is interesting, and this happens more often than not, even in my own family, right? My brother and I do this for a living, for other people. And financially, it wasn't the investments per se, because my mom was also pretty savvy as it relates to investments. It was what my dad was in charge of, which is the estate planning component. Now, every time we had a conversation with my dad, he's like, we're all set and everything's taken care of. And so you get to the stage of, well, gosh, we have to double check that everything's buttoned down regards to the estate plan, that mom is fully looked after, right? Everything's properly done. Let's double check everything. And in doing that, it's one of the first things that we did. We found out that my dad literally didn't do the single thing that you should do, which is finish and follow through from an estate planning side. By that, I mean, my mom and dad went to the estate planning attorney. They got their trust done. This is years before my dad was sick, and he brought us back and changed all the brokerage accounts over to the trust, and they have a living trust. But he didn't do the one extra step, which was real estate. So they had some real estate holdings, and even from their own personal house wasn't in the name of the trust, and some other things weren't in the name of the trust. And so as we go down this estate planning path, we're then having this conversation with our dad, who's now sick, saying, Dad, how did this come to be? Right. And it can happen to our own family, right? We're in the industry of taking care of and looking after people's financial and wealth management needs. And it happened to our own family. And it wasn't because my brother and I weren't, on top of it. It wasn't because the estate planning team wasn't on top of it. It was just because there's sort of a gap in sort of communication early on, where the estate planning and his understanding was, once you go to the estate planning attorney and you get your trust set up, you're done. That's just the beginning. So we see this in our world, financially speaking, all day long. And I'll tell you what I learned from that experience, and I help our clients now on a go-forward basis, is that when somebody says to me that we are all set, those are the worst words you can hear. If you're in the wealth management industry, you know that. I think you could think of probably 4 or 5 clients right now or even prospects, friends of friends, that say, don't know, they find out what you do. They say, okay, thanks, I'm all set. And it's not about the investments. That's the easy part. What we do in terms of investing, really, Diana, it's easy. It really is. The asset allocation, the financial planning, that really is easy. It's the other stuff that's sort of out there that you sort of have to make certain that you have a financial team that is working together, coordinating, communicating, playing well in the sandbox together, and following through, and then doing the review process every few years as tax law and estate planning and everything else changes. So yeah, that was a personal story where then we had to then do a fire drill from an estate planning standpoint through the years that my dad was alive. And it's embarrassing from a standpoint of like, how could this happen? Like introspectively, it's like, how is this? But it really came down to my dad's upbringing, right? Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, no one talked about it, right? It was, you didn't talk about the world of finance. And that's where I was, my mom is basically sort of the inspiration for what I call now as the Society of the Few, financially empowered women. And it's a community that I've created that promotes sort of confidence and education and support to help partner with, connect, organize, simplify, but understand where you are. And it's okay to talk about it. We create from that. I created in my own practice in Palm Desert, California, I created month luncheons at a nice little French restaurant here. And I would just have it for my clients. So it was a private client, a sort of one-on-one Society of the Few luncheon every month. And I would have my clients bring in a friend or a family member that they'd like to invite. And maybe we have 15 in the room at 3 different tables or so. And we go around the table every time. That's how I started these. And I said, I introduce who I am, what my mission is, why I started this. And I go around the table and say, what keeps you up at night financially speaking? And inevitably, Diana, there's 2 or 3 that are all the same. We're all the same, right? We all have the same concerns. But what I created, what was really different and unique about this was that environment of trust and okay to be in, sort of comforting, but okay to talk about it. I think that's where we are still behind the curve in terms of the communication or the ability to talk about it in terms of from one generation to the next, because back then in the 50s or 60s or 70s, generations didn't talk about money, right? It was taboo. And so it was very limited. So that's how we kind of got in that situation from day one. But if it happens to us, it can happen to everybody, right?
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere that talking about money was like more taboo than talking about sex or something like that. But
61% of women would rather talk about their own death than money.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, and that's crazy to me. But I mean, you bring up a good point about just the broader issue of women and wealth, and just some interesting insights here from a McKinsey study I was looking at. For decades, wealth management has been a male-dominated endeavor. Not only are the vast majority of advisors men, but also the customers making financial decisions are far more likely to be men than women. In 2/3 of affluent households in the U.S., men are the key financial decision makers. But as you know, that's changing. And McKinsey says that by 2030, American women are expected to control much of the $30 trillion in financial assets that baby boomers will possess. So, I mean, there's this change going on, and a lot of it is driven by men passing away and the women having to control the assets. And so, I mean, tell us a little bit about, I know that your experience with your mother kind of opened your eyes to what was going on Wall Street. And I think you were at a Wall Street firm at the time and sort of opened your eyes to how the industry treats women or sees women. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, how did that sort of open your eyes?
Yeah, it's a great sort of question, because today it's getting a lot better, right? So I'm a father of 4. We have 3 high school daughters, and I have 7 nieces. And so the world is extremely bright and I'm certainly encouraged, and I couldn't be happier to educate and support. And I'm always talking about it with anybody who will listen to my family or even their friends, because I really talk to their friends more, my high school daughters' friends, because they're like, they'll listen to me. My daughters won't listen to me. But that being said, going back even a decade in my 20-year career early on, tone in Wall Street, while it's changing today and it's still not where it needs to be, it's a lot better than it was a decade ago. And sort of when I had this sort of inspiration in my personal journey and going through this, I also circulated the idea of like, I want to create this sort of forum in this community for women and educate and support. And inside my own branch, inside my own financial wealth management firm, both locally and nationally, I got a lot of pushback. I got a lot of, that's never going to work. And why are you spending your time? And, guys have the money and all. And so that just made me even more motivated and determined and quite frankly, upset, just really pissed off, because I'm like, you know what? I had a personal situation. I see the world. I care for my wife, and I love my wife, and I'd never want my wife in that situation. And oh, by the way, it's a 50-50 marketplace. So as I'm growing my practice, that's fine. I'll do the blue ocean strategy where I'll swim to where everyone else is, not fishing or even looking for prospects, if you back in the day, and I'll create, sort of what I believe is a community. And if it happens to bear fruit and bring in business, wonderful. If not, then at least I'm true to myself and true to my mission and doing something that the office wasn't, right? And I will tell you that just exploded. And I was younger in the industry. And when you see all these back then, they're $1 million producers and they ruled the earth like dinosaurs. And they would see this young advisor bringing in assets after assets and then climbing the leaderboard and then bringing in stuff that they would even dream about and then passing them. I knew I was on the right track as it relates to that. Especially since they've been doing it for 20 or 30 or 40 years before me. And now I'm catching up to their AUM in 5 or 10 years. And that's when they're like, well, maybe this has something. I'm like, listen, are you married? Do you have daughters? Like, how are you? How do you have this mindset that's like totally, not even yesterday, like 2 decades ago? So anyway, it was my motivation every single day, walking into the office, knowing I was doing something for the right reasons. And one better, there was a big competitor of mine when we had a luncheon, and this wasn't too long ago. I would have my luncheons in my Society of the Few luncheons. And at the luncheon, we go introduce ourselves, and she'd introduce herself, and she's a friend of a friend, and she was the competitor's wife. So across the street, Wall Street firm, and she says to me afterwards, this is the God's honest truth, Diana. I am really worried about what happens when my husband dies. He has no planning. He's never brought me under the fold and what's going on. He goes, can I have your business card? Because if something ever happens, I'm going to come directly to you. And I was like, if that's not a testament to what's happening in Wall Street, and it's changing for the better, again, even 5 and 10 years ago, but it's still not where it needs to be. But I knew at that moment in time when my largest competitor, came to my wealth management educational forum luncheon, and she asked for my business card and said, when my husband passes away, I'm going to come see you. Now, that being said, my best clients aren't just, let's say, widows, if you will. It's women in transition. Obviously, everything is in the world today from the divorce rate to widowhood, and obviously women outlive men, and that's just a fact. And you have to prepare for that and be comfortable with that. But my best clients are couples, right? The couples that sit down with me, and the husband wants to, for the first time, get the wife, sort of up to speed financially speaking, or even on the same page, right? And I love interviewing couples and husbands and wife when they've been even married for 20 or 30 years and say, I'll interview both of them and say, but then I'll turn to her and I say specifically, okay, so what are your goals? What's important to you? And it could be for the first time ever that she basically opens up even in front of her husband, and they've been together for 20 years, right? And it's so empowering. It's so awesome. And then I put that together in a financial plan, and the rest goes from there. And that's the best. But, the reality of today is 9 out of 10 women will be solely responsible for their own financial well-being at some point in time in their financial future. So again, we have a responsibility to make certain that this mission continues.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that I bet you've probably had some criticism from women as well about these initiatives, because I think a lot of financial firms out there think that women's initiatives should only involve women advisors, and that women investors prefer women advisors. But I mean, I think you pointed out to me that it's actually 50-50. They prefer men 50% of the time and they prefer women 50% of the time. But I think that just sort of thinking of these initiatives as solely women based is sort of short-sighted, because I think men need to be a part of the solution, especially since a lot of the industry is made up of men. So I think you're doing a great thing here. I mean, I think some people might look twice when they see your name at the top of this organization, but why shouldn't you be part of the solution and helping women? I don't know. I think that's key. I think everybody in the industry needs to partner on it. And not just women.
I just look at it start with what my mission is, what my personal sort of vision is. And it starts at home, right? My kitchen table. What I started off with my dad saying, education and opportunity. And I'd be wasting all of that for what their sacrifices were, what my mom's sacrifices were, what my dad's legacy is, my mom's legacy is, and then what my daughters and nieces are, right? So when I start from that, my personal why, and again, my son and I are minorities in a sorority. So we are minorities. And so when I get on to financial boards or serving within the community, I am now, let's say, an all-woman board of directors. I am now having an opposite point of view, or even a complementary point of view, if you will. And at the end of the day, wealth management, as we know in this industry, it doesn't matter who's on the other side. It really matters is are they listening? Are they connecting? Do you mesh with them? Are they going to meet you at your pitch, right? Some advisors in our industry, both men and women, won't take people who don't have a certain level of sophistication because they just can't get down to that gear or have that empathy, if you will, or they're just too important, or they just manage too much money, right? I mean, it's all the, if you will, whatever that excuse could be, or whatever your business model is, right? And it's not right or wrong. But for those who are looking for an advisor or a team, it's to that person, right? Do you feel comfortable? Are they listening? And do they meet me at what I need? And I think that's the key, regardless of who's on the other side. But it really is. And that's one of the things where, through the Society of the Few, we encourage our clients to look through that network of advice, to go out there and interview advisors, interview estate planning attorneys and CPAs, and really work at it. It really is going to make all the difference in the world. But more importantly, do they play well in the sandbox together is another one of my keys, which is, at the end of the day, what I found was with my mom, as she was going through learning the language of all this medical jargon and the world of wealth management, which is estate planning and taxation and everything else, we coordinated for her and ran the lead with the CPA, getting all the 1099s or whatever it happens to be. We knew what that was, and we could proactively do that for my mom. And that's what we find and proactively do for our clients, which is say, hey, listen, we'll either organize it for you or show you what it is, or more importantly, we'll connect directly and we'll get on a conference call. And this way, whether it's a tax strategy that we want to implement, or whether it's an estate planning strategy we want to implement, we bring in the advisor that plays well in the sandbox for that client. And then we work well together. And then we work together to educate until the client's comfortable or understands, or at least happy, right? It's a different language. We know we get so caught up in our financial world of all of our jargon that we lose track of who we're serving and what they need. And so they really need us to work together too in the industry.
Yeah, I think that's some great insights for advisors out there serving women. I just wanted to tell people a little bit about the Confidence Summit that you launched in 2020. It's called Confidence Women, Wealth, and Wellness Summit. And I know that you guys had over 500 attendees this year. So it's a great thing to check out. It's a space for women to come together, network, and receive interactive, hands-on learning opportunities that span topics of finance, professional growth, and personal self-care. So it's a resource out there, and just some great work that you're doing, Rob. Thank you so much. I think we're just about out of time, but Rob, this has been great. I really thank you for being on the podcast and just opening up about your experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And I encourage everyone to go check out the Confidence Women, Wealth, and Wellness. So CW3, confidencesummit.com. Like I said before, it's the Society of the Few. I created that into a 501c3 who is now putting on, if you will, the Confidence Summit. And it's basically a resource for everybody. And you can tune in for what we're going to do next time. But yeah, it was overwhelming. 500 plus people attended, and we're excited to have that continue. So thank you for having me today, Diana.
Yeah, and we'll include links at the bottom here so you guys can check out those resources. But if you'd like to reach out to Robert, you have questions for him specifically, you can reach him at rschein@hightoweradvisors.com. And we'll put this information in the show notes as well. If you have a struggle and you wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at transparencywithdianab@gmail.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to Transparency with Diana B. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of wealthmanagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you have regarding your particular situation.